Hello and welcome back to this Temple Idealist Crusade. This video will be a quick Blu-ray review of one of my all-time favorite films, a film I return to every year, the first of the Val Lewton 9 horror film canon, the B films made for RKO in the 1940s, which revolutionized the horror genre for all time. And that is spine number 833, which is the Criterion Blu-ray release of 1942's Cat People, directed by Jacques Tourneur, written by DeWitt Bodine, and again produced by the legendary Val Lewton. This is the one of the 9 films that Criterion has released. It is rumored that they may have the rights to the second film in the cycle, I Walked with a Zombie, and perhaps also The Seventh Victim. Those are the 2 films that are now unavailable on Blu-ray. All the rest have gotten brand new scans and restorations and Blu-rays from Shout Factory and now the Warner Archive. So then to go to the first film, you have to, of course, pick up the Criterion release. Now, of course, Cat People was the first film of the 9 Val Lewton horror films that basically sets up the entire premise of what the Lewton horror films came to be known for, the fear of the unknown, of the unseen, basically inventing the concept of the psychological horror film, and all in the scare or shock sequences inadvertently invent what is now commonly referred to as the jump scare. But in the Lewton films, it was referred to as the Lewton bus, as the one of the most famous ones in Cat People. In the first of the major shock sequences, is revealed to be nothing more than the hissing air brakes of a bus that comes into frame. None of these are actual jump scares as we think of them today, which is probably the ultimate bastardized form of the Lewton bus. But these are little jolts, shall we say, that keep the audience invested in the story as the sense of overwhelming dread only continues. But Cat People is also at its core and its heart a story about people and individuals, a deeply emotional story that can be viewed a number of ways given the film's ambiguity. And it's that ambiguity that is found in all 9 of the Lewton films that also help keep them timeless, because they mean different things to different people. And the shock or scare sequences have been analyzed to death, as they should be, because they are masterworks of the genre. But it's often the rest of the film kind of gets short shrift because everybody focuses on the big scare sequences. So it was great that Criterion did decide to do one of the Lewton films, and I do hope that the other 2 do come out on Blu-ray sooner or later. Again, it's only a rumor if Criterion has the 2 that are currently not available on Blu-ray and have not been presented in restorations yet. I do have 2 complaints with this release, though, to get into the technical side of this. If you do want to hear more of my thoughts on Cat People's artistic importance, its importance as a horror film, and just my adoration for Val Lewton and these 9 horror films that are returned to every single year, I have recorded an audio commentary for Cat People on this channel. I've also done a live stream on Val Lewton and these horror films, so do check those out if you want to hear me babble on more about my undying love and adoration for Cat People. But in terms of the disc stats and the disc itself, this is a 2K scan, so it's credited as a new 2K restoration. This is already from a couple years ago, presumably done at Warner Brothers, who owns the rights to the Lewton catalog and has done new scans on all the other Lewton titles. That's very good, because previous to this, everything dated back to an old standard def master that actually originated on the 1994 Criterion release here on Laserdisc. This is still my favorite version of Cat People. Before I got the Blu-ray, this was always the one I came back to. This is Spine 233. It was released in 1994. It does include a nice Criterion supplement section in terms of text stills. It includes trailers for other Lewton films. Bruce Eder does the wonderful essay and also does a fantastic commentary track on this release, which I will mention again in just a moment with good reason. But this was good for the time. The master that Criterion used did reappear on the 1995 box set of all the Lewton titles. This was done via Turner Home Entertainment and Warner Brothers, but in partnership with Image Entertainment, who put this out. So this is pretty much the same master. And then when these were done on DVD in 2005, 2006 by Warner Brothers, Cat People did get spruced up a bit. Most of the others were just reusing the old standard F transfers, but Cat People did get spruced up a little bit and has now been spruced up once again in this newer 2K restoration. But I will say, when you compare this disc to the newest or the later releases that have gotten 4K scans for some of the other Lewton titles, especially the current or 2021 releases from the Warner Archive, first Isle of the Dead, and just now, the double feature release of The Ghost Ship and the paired with the final film of the cycle, 1946's Bedlam. Those are even more impressive because they are brand new 4K scans, whereas I'm assuming, since this disc was all the way back in 2016, that the 2K scan was maybe done in at least 2015 or perhaps even earlier. So this might be a title that could improve if it got a brand new 4K scan, just like the other titles. I don't know if that's going to happen. The results from the 2K scan are already great and far beyond what the standard def could achieve on that old master, even on the DVD that was a bit cleaned up. But it definitely does pale in comparison a little bit to the much sparklier, newer 4K scans of some of the other films. And it is really important because this film was shot by the legendary cameraman Nicholas Musuraca, who shot most of the Lewton 9 and really excelled in chiaroscuro, the difference between light and shadow, and could achieve deep shadows like almost no one else. And you can definitely tell the films he shot in the Lewton cycle versus the films that he didn't shoot, because as the films went on, the cast and crew kind of changed around a little bit. So not only did you change writers and change directors from film to film, but it also changed cinematographers. And the more you watch these films, especially if you watch them back to back, you can notice the difference between who worked on which film. So that is one of my caveats with this disc, and admittedly that's going to be only the people who are intimately acquainted with the Lewton films and have already watched, or who will own the other titles on Blu-ray. They kind of outshine Cat People in their transfer because this is an older transfer. But again, it is still extremely good, and especially for the time, and it is the best we have ever seen the film on home video. So don't get me wrong and think that I'm saying that the transfer is bad. It is not at all. It is definitely cleaned up in picture and sound far beyond the older releases, and the sound itself, the original mono, is cleaned up to a degree that it is a bit more detailed and doesn't have the inherent damage of the older releases. Particularly, all the older releases had some music warble at the very end, crescendo right before the RKO logo. Well, practically the most important part, the emotional climax of the film, that has been fixed. I believe it was Chase Audio who handled the restoration work on this particular mono on the Blu-ray release from Criterion. I think Criterion did some additional work on top of that. So in picture and sound, it is the best we've gotten, but I do think it could probably look a little bit better if it had a new modern 4K scan. To go over the extras very quickly, it does port over a lot of stuff from the Warner releases. So in terms of new content and extras, there's not really a whole lot. You do get the Greg Mank commentary from the 2005 DVD, which also has some interview excerpts with the star Simone. It's a great track, as are all of Greg Mank's commentaries. So if you didn't listen to it on the DVD, you can listen to it on the Criterion Blu-ray. It's a great track. Listen to it every time I rewatch the film. Then next is probably the best overview for Val Lewton's career and the importance of these horror films. It's the Val Lewton, The Man in the Shadows documentary, which was, I think, originally produced for Turner Classic Movies, then released on DVD, and it is part of the old Val Lewton DVD collection from Warner Brothers. So that's been ported over. I believe it's been bumped up to HD in terms of the encoding. I don't think it's standard def anymore, but it is something that did previously exist on DVD, like the commentary. Then next is pretty much the big draw for big Lewton fans coming to the Blu-ray. It is a vintage 1979 interview with Jacques Tourneur, the director of this film, and the first three of the Lewton horror films. One of Lewton's great friends and one of his best collaborators, who went on to a phenomenal career. He is one of the great underrated master directors of motion pictures, and it's really fantastic to get this piece, which is a nice, roughly half-hour piece. Actually, shortly, it was recorded not too long before he passed away, so that gives it extra resonance. But he is extraordinarily candid, and just has a wonderful charm to just his speaking voice. It is, of course, in French and is subtitled, but it's just wonderful to be able to see this because it's like a little lost treasure. Tourneur is not somebody who was ever, put on a pedestal or quoted or interviewed all that often. So that only makes it all the more special that we have such an intimate discussion at length with someone who I have respected and admired for most of my entire life, and will continue to and carry the Jacques Tourneur torch. He really is one of the great directors who just does not get the recognition or credit that he deserves, whether talking in horror circles or film noir or western or just in general, because he truly was a great director. So that's the primary extra that is brand new. That's going to be the big draw. And it's a fantastic listen. You really don't want to turn it off. You start watching it, and then before you know it, it's been 30 minutes, and it's fantastic. Then last, in terms of the on-disc extras, there is another new piece with John Bailey, the cinematographer, who actually shot the Paul Schrader 1982 remake of Cat People. And he has a nice outlook on Cat People and how he was introduced to it, and then some of the ways in which he and Paul Schrader approached the remake, which is one of those films that I understand the impetus and some of the ideas behind it, and I can appreciate some of the different approaches and some of the ideas, but I absolutely despise the 1982 film. I can't stand it because it makes everything that is so beautifully poetic about this original picture, this masterpiece that reduces me to just a blubbering wreck by the end of it every single time. It makes everything explicit and really dumbs down a lot of the characterizations. It really removes all of the poetry of this masterpiece picture, and it's one of those pictures I try to pretend just simply did not exist. I know it does have a great fan base, and that's perfectly fine. If you like the remake, that's no problem, but it's one of those that I absolutely cannot stand. I choose to just never go back to it. I just don't want to know. But it is interesting to get that perspective here on the extras, and especially the bit where he admits when they did restage the iconic second horror sequence from Cat People, the infamous swimming pool scene, that they found there was no way they could really improve on it, so they simply remade it, but the only difference this time being that it was in color, and the poor girl stuck in the swimming pool being menaced was, of course, now naked. So to show you the actual interior art, here is the disc with the fur-like, but it's a fur-like interior image. Then the booklet is actually a fold-out. Jeffrey O'Brien does the essay, but this is something different for Criterion. They do different stuff with their booklets sometimes, but this is an actual art poster. So here you have the image of the snarling cat, and then down here in the bottom you have a stylized portrait of the other primary characters of Oliver and Alice down there being menaced by the giant cat. It's a really nice image, and I really like how they design this. And then the essay is on the flip side. And that is the Criterion Blu-ray for Cat People. There is one other particular issue that I have with this disc, and that's something I'm still unsure as to why this occurred, but usually when Criterion does Blu-rays of titles that were previously in the collection in the Laserdisc era, they do try to carry over the special features and or the commentaries, but here, for some strange reason, This brings over the Greg Mank commentary from the Warner DVD, which is excellent, but it doesn't bring over Criterion's own commentary from the 1994 Laserdisc. So the Bruce Eater commentary is still exclusive to the original Laserdisc release. And it's a really good track that I enjoyed listening to over and over again, along with the Greg Mank commentary. So that unfortunately keeps the Criterion Blu-ray from being fully complete in what it should be. I don't know why this occurred. I don't know if it was somehow they didn't have the rights to their own commentary track, or it was oversight, or maybe somebody felt that the Greg Mank track was enough and they didn't need to port over the Bruce Eater track. But they've also ported over other Bruce Eater tracks from the Laserdisc era. So again, I'm not exactly sure why this occurred, but it makes and keeps the original '94 Laserdisc, this Spine 233. It makes it still important to have, and it's one of the really great Criterion commentaries that Bruce Eater did in the Laserdisc era. So unfortunately, the Blu-ray is not completely definitive. It is the best picture and sound for the film that we've ever gotten on home video. It does have the wonderful Jacques Tourneur interview, which is essential, has the nice write-up and the beautiful new transfer, but it doesn't have the Laserdisc commentary. So to have absolutely everything, you will have to unite the two arenas and have both the Criterion Laserdisc and the Criterion Blu-ray. And since I've spent so much time with this one is still my sentimental favorite, and I still really love the cover artwork design. But the Criterion Blu-ray is the way to go in every other instance, and it does have the best picture and sound that we've gotten for the film to date. Again, I wish that it had the Bruce Eater commentary, because I really think it's a great track with some wonderful insights that complement the Greg Mank track from the Warner Brothers DVD. So that's it for this particular review. Again, I'm trying to keep these relatively short and primarily focused on the disc contents and specs itself. But this is for, again, Criterion's Blu-ray Spine 833, the 1942 Val Lewton produced masterwork Cat People. Still probably the best overall of the 9 horror films he produced for RKO in the 1940s. This being the first, it was the sort of clarion call, the landmark film that changed the face of the horror genre, and did so in ways that were not even really dreamed of before, and also the most financially successful and the most famous of the 9 Val Lewton horror films. But once you see this, you really feel like having to watch the rest of the 8 immediately, because they form a 9-film canon unlike anything else in the entire history of the motion picture medium. They are completely unique and absolutely life-changing, beautiful, emotional masterpieces that are completely human at their core, and just bleeding forth with emotion and intelligence and true poetry. So hopefully, if you have not picked up this Blu-ray yet from Criterion, this review hopefully might encourage you to perhaps do so. If you're a fan of this film, you do need this release. It is the best technical presentation of the film we've ever had, and it does have the nice additional exclusive extra or two. Again, the only thing keeping this from being definitive is maybe if Cat People could get a newer 4K transfer and could finally port over the Bruce Eater Laserdisc commentary. So if you have any comments on this release, or on the Lewton films, or Cat People, or Criterion, please leave them down below. I always love to hear from you guys. And I will continue on in this series of Blu-ray reviews as much as I possibly can, and also chipping away at various Criterion Spine numbers as I go along. So as always, thank you ever so much for watching. Let's keep supporting our boutique labels as long as we possibly can. Keep physical media alive and keep your disc spinning.